Welcome to Between the Covers, and this is a special re-release of our To Kill a Mockingbird episode because it is Banned Books Week. It is one of the most banned books in America, and you might be surprised if you Google some of your favorite books. They may have been banned somewhere, sometime by somebody who didn't want other people to read them.
Every book that has anything important to say has been banned by somebody somewhere. You can count on it. In the list that we have so far, we've done 10 books. 3 of them are pretty commonly banned. Catch-22 is often banned. It was banned by a district in Ohio, but students in that school actually sued the city because they didn't have access to that book, and the federal appeals court granted the students the right to read that book if they wanted to. You can fight against this kind of thing. Brave New World, often banned. So it was banned in one school district because it's centered around negative thinking. That was the reason. Another school library banned it because it showed contempt for religion, marriage, and family. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you read these comments about why books are banned, you can tell that the person doing the banning had not read the book because they don't understand what it's about at all.
Well, maybe they read it and didn't understand it.
Well, that's possible, but I doubt it because
you don't know.
I don't think they read. But To Kill a Mockingbird is one of the most commonly banned or challenged, mostly because of the language, which we talk about in
this episode. I was raised by a librarian, and you should be able to count on your local library to make banned books available to you. But also, if you want to get involved or learn more, just Google Banned Books Week in your area, and there may be something you can participate in. I know that some places read aloud from banned books to mark the week and to remind us that these are freedoms that you have to be active to protect, like those students in Ohio.
Exactly. Right. The First Amendment is the cornerstone of American democracy.
That's right.
Freedom of the press, freedom of speech. And if you don't make a stand for those freedoms, then you may as well go live in a communist country.
That escalated quickly. Anyway, have a listen and enjoy our To Kill a Mockingbird episode.
And we promise you that there will be many, many more banned books that we'll be talking about as the podcast goes on.
That's right. So, Jay Ruud, what lovable book are we talking about today?
Well, I will give you a hint. Monroeville.
Okay. I'll need another hint.
All right.
Welcome to Between the Covers, where each episode we talk about another lovable book in the English language with the love of my life, author Jay Ruud. He is the author of the Robin Hood Mystery series. This is Ghoul of Sherwood, but he also has Treasure of Sherwood, which has just come out. And if you want to start the series at the beginning, you can begin with Sleuth of Sherwood. Or if King Arthur's more your line, he has the Merlin Mystery series as well. He's also a retired English professor and a voracious reader.
And I'm here with my lovely wife, Stacey Margaret Jones, author of Mr. Catherine, set in Little Rock, Arkansas. A woman goes missing, but I won't go into that here. Anyway, she is a college instructor of English and of creative writing and a voracious reader her own self.
All right. Well, I hope I'm not embarrassed again like I was last time with Brave New World when I had just read that book and didn't get it from the hint. So give me another hint.
All right.
Okay, Monroeville. Okay,
Calpurnia.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird it is.
Awesome. Calpurnia. Oh, my goodness. She is a saint. All right. So we're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird by
Harper Lee.
Harper Lee. And when did it come out?
1960.
Okay. So
in fact, we are recording this on July 11th. To Kill a Mockingbird was published on July 11th, 1960.
No way. Well, it's To Kill a Mockingbird Day.
It's To Kill a Mockingbird Day. So let's kill that mockingbird.
All right. So why don't you give us the down and dirty plot or down and dirty summary of the book?
Okay. This is a book that's set in a fictional town in Alabama. It's told from the point of view of a young 10-year-old girl named, her nickname is Scout.
Jean Louise,
who's called Scout. She has an older brother named Jeremy or Jem, and she lives with her widowed father, Atticus, and Calpurnia, who's their maid, housekeeper, cook, and everything else.
Resident saint.
Yeah. In the first few chapters, it's sort of a nostalgic look at small town life in the South, and Jem and Scout and their friend Dill, who's little, but he's old.
I love Dill.
He's a little guy, but he's much older than he looks. Yeah. And there are two kind of tangents that the book follows. One has to do with Scout's neighbor, Boo Radley, who is supposedly sometime in his youth, he had committed some crime, and his father forced him to stay in his room and never go out, and he hasn't been out of the house in decades. And Jem and Scout and Dill are all curious about him, a little afraid that he might be sort of the bogeyman. And the other story arc, and the one that most people remember the most, has to do with Atticus, who's a lawyer, and he's appointed as to be the lawyer for the defendant in a rape case. Tom Robinson is a black man who's been accused of raping and beating up a white girl named Emmylou Ewell, I think is the name, if I remember right.
It's not Emmylou, but it's Ewell is her last name. Anyway. Mayella.
Okay, that is right. And so he defends him as best he can, and gets a lot of pushback from everybody in town, every white person in town, who none of them think, even the better ones don't think he should be defending this black boy.
So who else loves this book? What other lists?
Everybody loves this book. In fact, let me tell you, this is on the Time magazine's list of the greatest books in English since 1923, which was the year that Time magazine was created. So it's on that list. It's on the Observer's list of the best world novels. It's on the Guardian's list of the best novels in English. It was on the Penguin Classics list of the favorite novels voted on by their readers. Its popularity seems to just be growing. In 2006, Great Britain's Museum, Libraries, and Archives Council did a World Book Day, and they polled all the librarians in the United Kingdom to answer the question, which book should every adult read before they die? And the number one book was To Kill a Mockingbird.
In the UK?
In the UK.
Wow.
The number two book was the Bible.
Goodness.
In 2018, PBS conducted a survey called The Great American Read, in which members of the public voted on America's favorite book. And the number one book was To Kill a Mockingbird. And even more recently, in 2021, to mark the 125th anniversary of the publication of the New York Times Book Review, the New York Times invited readers to vote for the best book published in the last 125 years. And after receiving more than 200,000 votes from across the country and from 61 foreign countries, the number one book was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Wow.
So when I say everybody loves this book,
a lot of people love this book.
Not kidding.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, this is also a book we've read aloud very recently.
So it is.
It was a reread for both of us, right? You'd read it before, and I had read it, but I hadn't read it since I was probably 22, 23.
I hadn't read it since I was 15.
Yeah, so longer.
So that's been a while.
And I want to say that reading the book, if you've seen the movie, don't think you've read the book. I mean, the movie is a good translation of what is movieable from the book, right? But there's so much in the book that I completely forgot about because I think I was remembering the book based on the movie, right?
Yeah.
Like the movie took over my memories of the book. So it'll be interesting to talk to you about it today because of what's, just the beautiful aspects, the really touching, and just how she captures that life. It's so just rich and evocative.
Well, interesting that you mentioned the movie. The movie came out in 1962, so it was right after the book.
Oh, that
they
quickly.
started making it basically right after the book won the Pulitzer Prize in 1961. And it was nominated for 8 Academy Awards in 1962. Now, 1962 was the year that Lawrence of Arabia was made, so it didn't win all that many. It did win 3 Academy Awards, which is pretty impressive against the competition. And Gregory Peck, who plays Atticus Finch, won the Best Actor Oscar over Peter O'Toole.
Oh, wow.
Who in fact never won an Oscar, though he was nominated 8 times. But that's a different story.
That's a different podcast.
But the fact is, anybody who has seen the movie will never read the book without picturing Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch.
It can't be done.
I mean, he's that much identified with the role. And Harper Lee loved the movie.
Oh, okay.
And she loved it so much, she gave Gregory Peck her father's watch.
Oh my goodness.
And Atticus in the book is based on her father, who was a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, it's probably not as autobiographical as like the Little House books.
No.
But it is based on her. I mean, Dill is based on Truman Capote. Wasn't Truman Capote the kind of inspiration for the character of Dill?
Yeah. He was her best friend growing up. In fact, the year that she published To Kill a Mockingbird, 1960, she spent most of that year with Truman Capote researching his book.
In Cold Blood?
In Cold Blood, yeah.
Yeah, I knew she did a lot of work on that.
They were kind of parallel.
Yeah.
But the movie, of course, doesn't get into Scout as much.
Right.
Because she's the one who tells the story in the book.
And that's one thing I think that Harper Lee does exceptionally well is, if you're telling a story about yourself, even if it's based on yourself or a child, but you're an adult, it's very hard to really get an authentic child's viewpoint because you can't unknow what you know as an adult, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that she does really well, that she really does tell it from Scout's point of view, and Scout's point of view is limited. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's part of the magic of the book, that, Scout kind of awakens to things and the reader gets to awaken to them as well. And it isn't told from this great height, right? It's like you live with Scout, you run around barefoot and wait for Dill to come every summer, and you wonder about Boo Radley and you're scared of him, but you can't stop thinking about him. And I mean, it's really, really well done.
And then you dare each other to go up and touch the house that Boo lives in, and then when Boo starts, or someone starts leaving presents in the tree in front of his house for the kids, it's Boo Radley.
I know.
And they aren't quite sure.
He's so pitiable. It just makes me tear up because it's just such a broken character. And yet I think in Harper Lee's hands, she loves him, right? Like you can tell when a writer loves their characters in that way. And, Harper Lee loves Boo.
This thing about Scout's point of view, sometimes Jem will see something that she doesn't. And so that kind of comes into the book.
Yeah, he explains.
She's kind of learning that way. Or Atticus will tell her something about Boo Radley. And
it does, even though, I didn't grow up in a small town in the South. And when I was very little, I lived in a city. But it still evokes those childhood, because we could fall out of our house and there were kids both places we lived growing up. And I just remember spending all these, you just left the house and played outside with your friends all day and rode bikes around and went to the parks and then you built up these mythologies around things, right? Like there were these abandoned buildings little sheds near where we lived in De Smet, and we just had all these kind of stories about them and would play there and, created these worlds for ourselves. And even though it's different in many ways, reading about the childhood in To Kill a Mockingbird, I don't know, it can't help but take you back to some aspects, especially the way she introduces things through Jem's eyes.
Yeah.
Because she notices too that Jem is changing. Jem doesn't want to play with them. Jem's too big to do this or too grown up to do that. And that is also part, I was the youngest. So that's part of being the youngest too. And having your siblings kind of outgrow the stuff that you do together. So feels very authentic and very real. But that's not, that's the foundation, the setting, the emotional kind of weather of the book.
Yeah.
But
that's the first part of the book.
Yes. And there's a lot of color in terms of the environment and creating that environment. There's lots of kind of episodes and anecdotes and Scout at school and fighting with her teacher, all those really charming, kind of funny things that make Scout such a memorable character. But the book isn't on all those lists and voted on by everybody in the world as you have to read this book because of that. There's really, really challenging and important themes in the book. And it came out in 1960. So, in terms of what was happening in America then.
Well, it really is, it hits at the right time, I think, because the civil rights movement really gets underway in the mid-50s. 1960 is the year before the boycotts of Woolworths and the Freedom Riders on the buses in the South.
Yeah.
So it really hits at that right time.
Yeah.
It's set in the 1930s. It's set in 1936.
Right.
But the South and attitudes in the South hadn't changed much, if at all.
Right.
By the time you get to the 1950s, late 1950s.
Well, and she could even do, I think, what Edith Wharton did a little bit, which is to look back on a world that was changing, but to say, even if it wasn't changing quickly enough or at all, but there were changes happening. And to look back on the world and say, this is the foundation of what we see now, right? This is how it has been. And just even a generation of distance helps you feel safer to criticize it.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, but there's it takes some guts.
I'm not saying that it was an easy book to write.
There are a lot of cases that the Tom Robinson case may have been suggested by. One that actually occurred when she was 10 years old in 1936. But it's unlikely that she didn't have the Emmett Till the Emmett Till case in mind.
Yeah.
Because that had happened only a few years earlier.
Okay, I was going to ask about that.
He was a northern kid who comes to the South and flirts with some white girl.
Supposedly. I mean, didn't
At
she
least-
come out later and say, I think they found out later that she said that he hadn't really even said that much to her.
Well,
Anyway.
in any case, he was accused of
Yeah.
that happening, and he was tortured and
Murdered.
and
Mhm.
hanged.
Mhm.
And although everybody knew who had done it, and the evidence was pretty much overwhelming, the people who had killed him were found innocent by an all-white jury.
Right.
Now, that's not quite what happens in
No, it's
To Kill a Mockingbird. Tom Robinson is accused. Atticus makes the case. It's an airtight case. And he shows, okay, no one ever brought a doctor in, so there was actually no evidence that she was raped.
right. Any of this happened.
Tom Robinson's left arm was useless. He was basically a one-armed man.
Yeah.
And he could not have done what they said he did.
Mhm.
Particularly, he couldn't have beaten her up
Right.
because somebody had to have a left arm to have beaten her the way she was beaten. And it's almost certain that her father did the beating.
Right.
And yet he's found guilty.
Yeah. And there was no way, nobody, I think, even in the book, they kind of are like, nobody thinks that he's going to be found not guilty because
No.
it's a white jury in a.
Nobody thinks he's going to be found not guilty, even though everybody knows he's not guilty.
Right.
And
Because the verdict is for the structure of society, not the accusation of that one man. Right.
And so, I mean, Atticus tells him that we've got a really good chance to win this on appeal, but
Don't talk too much now.
I'm not going to take lots of things
Spoilers.
happen after the verdict that I won't get into, but that cause havoc. But one thing that happens is that although Atticus is not surprised at all, Jem is really upset about this miscarriage of justice. He and Scout have gone to the trial. They couldn't find any place to sit on the ground floor and had to go up into the balcony where all the black people were.
Mm-hmm.
And they stay with they sit by the pastor from Calpurnia's church.
Right. Whom they've met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jem is just terribly upset about this. And there's a discussion about what, Atticus goes into things like more prosperous people in town, the better educated people in town usually can get off of jury duty. So it's usually,
The country people.
the country folk that come in and are on the jury. Also, there's a law in Alabama that women cannot serve on jury.
I know.
So there's no women on the jury. This.
It took a long time for women to be able to serve on juries in the United States.
Yes. And this is what Atticus talks about. And this is something that I find interesting. Atticus is sort of the voice of reason. He's the voice of saintliness, the voice of the man who does his
What he
duty
says.
and what
He lives his values.
he does. But he never mentions the most obvious problem, that it's an all-white jury. That here's a black man who's supposed to have a trial by a jury of his peers, and the peers are all white crackers, basically. And
Well, and I think that shows you that either Harper Lee is making a point that this is just so accepted that there's never going to be any black people at a jury in Alabama, or it was so accepted by Harper Lee that she didn't even think to have the character mention it.
yeah, that's what I wonder, because it's so obvious, and it never gets mentioned.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean, they recently had a case, I think it was Alabama, where somebody was tried 6 times for triple murder, triple homicide, and the local prosecuting attorney just kept it was a man who was Black who was accused, and he just kept kicking Black people off the juries. So, I mean, that was, within the past 10 or 20 years.
yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. So it isn't like this has all gone away.
Right.
Well,
and I think that's an important thing, is that I think that's one of the reasons that I love the book, is that, whatever parental relationships you have, Atticus can be your dad, right? Like, you can say, this fictional character is a father figure to me because he makes hard choices, because he plays the long game, right? He says in the book several times, I can't do this. If I don't do this, I cannot go home to my children, because I will not be doing what I tell them to do. I have to do this. And it's things that people don't want to do. They even talk about how they chose him to defend Tom Robinson because he was the only one who might win.
Who might actually try to
win.
Would
try.
Somebody has to be appointed, but It could just be somebody who
phone it in and get the verdict. They all know it was coming, but he tried. Yeah. Right.
And he does some courageous things that Scout doesn't completely understand. Because there's a lynch mob in front of the jail at one point.
A literal lynch mob.
A literal lynch mob. And the only one there standing between them and the prisoner is Atticus.
Yeah.
But Jem and Scout and Dill go down there to see what's going on. And Scout is kind of this innocent little girl, and she sees one of the guys in the mob, he's the father of one of the kids she goes to school with.
That they invited home for lunch because he didn't have lunch with him because he was too poor.
And also he has been a client.
Right, so she knew him.
Who didn't have money to pay, and so paid in kind, in some sort of crop that they
trade.
So she goes up to him in the middle of this lynch mob and says, "Hi, Mr. So-and-so.
Yeah.
How are you? How's your son? I haven't seen him lately." And
diffuses.
Yeah. And the guy is so embarrassed at being where he is and doing what he's doing that he just kind of turns around and leaves. And when he does, everybody else does.
Yeah, they can't answer for what they're going to do to an innocent, right? They have no justification for it. If they have to explain it to her, they can't.
Yeah. And he's been singled out as an individual. And
right, the mob.
And so the mob mentality kind of goes away.
Falls apart.
Yeah.
But also, I think that moment is interesting because it's also something that happens in the book, is that she sees him as a person, right? And worthy of respect. Even though at that moment he's a threat to her father, she acknowledges him respectfully. Hey, how you doing? Not like, you get out. How could you do that?
Yeah.
She's, I know you. And okay, I see you, right? And so it does take, the mob falls apart with that, but also it's the respect of the individual, which Atticus pays to the defendant, the accused. He sees him as the individual he is, which is why he's able to try the case, because he doesn't lump him with the way the community sees people. So that's fascinating. So what are some reasons people might not love this book because people challenge this book a lot.
Yes, they do. It's another one of those books that's often taught in high school and middle school, and it often gets attacks. And it's come under criticism, particularly by Black readers in recent years.
Well, I'll say that reading it aloud was challenging because some of the language that,
the N word is used 48 times in the book.
It felt like more. It just felt really.
And even though, Atticus tells Scout never use that word, but it's a realistic depiction of how people talked at the time.
I can see why. As a teacher, I can see why I would have trouble standing in front of a class.
Oh, yeah.
Discussing that book.
Yeah.
Like, it is so sensitive and so explosive.
Yeah.
I think. But what...
And another reason is Atticus is a white savior figure.
Yeah.
And so... Not that Tom Robinson wouldn't be able to get himself out of this himself, but that kind of a story is
I can see
has been told a lot, and in some ways is
I think there are things for us to learn there from that objection.
Yeah.
Like, this is the story that Harper Lee could tell because of who she was and when she grew up and how it was when she grew up. But we have new stories now too, right?
Yeah.
That continue the conversation in ways it needs to be continued. But I can see, I understand that objection. I think there's a lot of sensitive, obviously, aspects to the book.
Yeah.
It's about very challenging topics.
Yeah. She wants to give a picture of what this town was like in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And even the more progressive figures in the town are really just casually racist.
Yes.
They will casually use the N word.
Yeah, they do.
In regular conversation. And they don't even realize what they're doing sometimes. Not that there's a scene, she pokes fun at some of these people that aren't major characters or anything, but
you mean Harper Lee does?
Yeah. Yeah. That happen to be in this town. There's the Aunt Alexandra, who she attends this meeting. This
women's meeting? Was it the women's meeting?
Yeah, it's a women's meeting about missionary. It's a missionary society. And they worry about the poor Maruna tribe in Africa and the way they live. They're so poor and they have all these needs. So we really need to help those people. But they have nothing but contempt for the black people who live in their own community.
Yeah.
And they don't. One of the women says, "We can educate them till we're blue in the face. We can try till we drop to make Christians out of them, but there's no lady safe in her bed these nights." Yeah. And this is kind of a response to the Tom Robinson thing.
Right. And then there's no acknowledgement of the society that they have, even if they didn't create it, they certainly help sustain it.
Yeah. That
makes Tom Robinson utterly powerless from the moment he is accused.
Yeah.
And there's no right. Like, it's easy. We can care about these people over there and the people around us. We're still going to make sure that
they know their place. The teacher. There's in Scout's classroom, Miss Gates.
Yeah.
This is in 1936. Miss Gates is talking to her class about the status of Jews in Hitler's Germany.
Yeah.
And one of the students makes the comment that the persecution of Jews is irrational because Jews are white. And Miss Gates only responds that the persecution of the Jews is one of the most terrible stories in history. it doesn't even occur to her that the unspoken implication in the student's question is that persecuting non-whites is perfectly rational.
Exactly.
It sends shivers down your spine when you read that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's all over the book.
And that is really something that Lee is expert at as well. She doesn't hit you over the head with it, but it's right. She makes sure you can see it if you're looking, So, where do we rank this book? Our ranking pretty soon I'll have to have note cards, but right now I can remember. Number 1 is Catch-22. Number 2, or Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Number 2 is Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Number 3 is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So where are we going to put To Kill a Mockingbird on our list of most lovable books in the English language?
I'm going to put it between Brave New World and Pride and Prejudice.
Wow, interesting. Okay. With all those accolades, you're such a rebel.
I'm a rebel. I know what I like.
All right.
This is my list.
I know.
So it's books that are lovable, but the particular place that I love them is
that's fine.
Purely subjective.
Perfect. Well, by the end, we'll give readers a list in order. They can read starting with the 100th most lovable, or they can start at the top just in case they don't finish and they don't want to miss the best ones.
There you go.
All right.
So is it time now for Chaos Reader?
It is time for Chaos Reader. So I actually mentioned this, the Little House books. Speaking of sensitive books, we're reading The Long Winter from Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House series. We're reading this book aloud because you had never read them, which shocked me because I grew up in DeSmet, South Dakota, which is the setting for many of the Little House, Little Town books. And
you were a tour guide.
I was a tour guide at at the homes, and grew up in the town. And this is my favorite Little House book because it's about one of my favorite things, which is winter. But it's also great because they move into town, and it is about the town I grew up in. And Laura Ingalls Wilder fictionalized her childhood, right? This is not an autobiography. These are children's novels, right? Based on things that happened to her. The characters are the names of her family. Things happened, but they are fiction. So you can't assume that anything in them happened the way, it's in the book.
But it's probably closer to reality than, say, To Kill a Mockingbird
Maybe,
is.
yes. But she does mention somebody in here that the Sherwoods, and my mom's best friend in DeSmet was Phyllis Sherwood Bell. And so it's really cool to me as someone who lived there to hear about these places and then hear those names like, oh my gosh, those are the ancestors of my friends and the people I grew up with. But I can't wait for this. We're about 100 pages in, and I love this book because of the winter. It's very dramatic, and I just love it.
That will be on your list of your 100.
I don't know. I mean, obviously there are issues with the books, the Little House books, because of the treatment of the Native people. And it should be something that people think about before they share them with children. But I really love it. So that's what's happening with Chaos Reader.
Okay. Oh, you know what we never did?
What? We
never talked about the title, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, well, let's revisit that before we wind it up for today.
Atticus gives Jem an air rifle. And he says, you can shoot all the blue jays you want with it, but don't shoot any mockingbirds because it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. And the reason that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird is that all they do is sing. They don't bother anybody. There are at least 2 mockingbirds in the book. Mm-hmm. There's Tom Robinson and there's Boo Radley.
Right. They don't bother anybody.
And it's a sin to shoot them.
Yeah. It is. Well, it's a beautiful book. Well, that concludes our episode on To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm glad I guessed it since we just finished. Like, subscribe, and you can find links to our books in the show notes, the liner notes. And we'll see you here next time.
Between the covers.
Between the covers.